Good morning, beautiful ladies. I am Dalila Vasquez. Welcome to Cafecito con Chisme, a time where conversations with women and for women come to us to enlighten us, inspire us, and inform us of the spaces we step into, we walk through, and we make our own. We are your hosts, Rosa Martin and Dalila Vasquez. We are an intergenerational duo, and we're hoping to bring you conversations for women and about women. We call our talks Cafecito con Chisme because we want to create spaces for womanhood, for us to share, to grow. We want to retake our spaces of conversation about each other. So it's not just chisme, it's not gossip, it's conversation. We are not gossiping or chismeando. We are compartiendo, right? We're sharing our stories. More importantly, we are giving our best to each other, and we'll talk about faith, life, business, hopes, and dreams. At least that is our dream, right? So, good morning, Rosa. How are you today?
Buenos dias. I am doing really great. It's a beautiful morning, nice and early. I can hear the birds chirping outside. And today we do have a very special guest with us that I would like to introduce to everyone, Julia Amante. She is an author and she's been writing for over 25 years. She's worked with 3 major New York publishers. She's currently a college professor and is also spending her days helping other writers in their personal development and also working on blogs to build that community. Hello, Julia.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be up so early in the morning. And my chihuahuas went back to bed, by the way.
I'm glad that you said yes. Thank you very much for joining us. I mean,
You're welcome.
It's a privilege, and I feel privileged because I know you on a personal level, and I love you on a personal level. But that doesn't mean that I love you less as an author. You know, I'm your #1 fan.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's great to be here.
Yeah, so let's get into the conversation. Who are you? Who's Julia Amante?
Oh, well, okay. So I was thinking about this last night, and just last night. Yeah. Just
Hopefully you didn't stay up too late.
Right. No. No, I think as an author, I feel like I've matured over the years. So when I think when I started as an author, I was just excited about writing. You know, I didn't think I could write, to be honest. I didn't think that I could create books the way my favorite authors did. And I just did it for fun. I was like, okay, I'm just going to write. You know, I want to create my own stories. I think I could write like this, but I'm not positive. And I didn't have anybody in my family that, like, my mom doesn't really read, you know, because she's, as an immigrant, she learned English, so she used to read in Spanish. My parents are from Argentina, and when she was there, she read in Spanish, but here she didn't have books to read in Spanish, so she didn't read. So I didn't grow up with watching people read. My dad would read the newspaper. So reading and writing, it wasn't something that I grew up with, but I loved. I was just attracted to from the moment I was a little kid. And so thinking of writing my own books, I just thought, well, you know, who am I to think I'm going to write a book? But eventually I just kept, it was a passion. I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And it was my husband who finally said, you know, locked for hours of my office writing, are you ever going to do anything with that? Are you ever going to try to publish? And I thought, I don't even know how, like, I don't know what to do. And so he, for my birthday, purchased 3 courses for me. One was on publishing, one was on just basic writing. I forget what the other one was. And then I realized, like, oh, okay, I know how to, so this is a business. I'm actually creating a product, and this product is, if I find the right person that wants to buy the product, so I looked at it differently. And I think I grew, right, as a writer. So more and more and more, at first you're like, well, can I even do it? Can I even write a book? And then you realize, you like, who am I? I'm a person that's constantly growing and constantly learning. And I don't know if I become better as a writer. You have less confidence actually the longer you write, because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe that was my first book. It was terrible.
Well, I don't know about your first book being terrible.
But yeah, but you try things like when you're younger, you don't have that in your mind. You're like, I can do it. I can do anything. And when you get older, you start to put those, I don't know what you call it. Yeah, those limits on yourself. And you're like, okay, no, I can't. How could I ever have done that? I did that because I didn't know any better. And that's sometimes better. It's better because you don't know anything. So you're constantly growing and kind of going backwards at the same time, I think, as the older you get.
Well, I can't wait until you later on in the show. I must say, your first book is my favorite. Becoming a Latina in 10 Easy Steps. And it's under a different penmanship name.
Yeah.
I think that all Latina women should read it. And thank God, before I read it, you told me, I don't think it's appropriate for your daughter when she's only 14.
Yeah. And actually, that was my fifth published book. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, so the little romances that I wrote at the beginning, I don't think anybody read.
Julia, I don't know if the audience or everyone else has watched the reunion for Friends, but what I found interesting is, I'm with you as an author, with what you just mentioned, growing more insecure with what you write about. I saw Chandler on there, or whatever his real name is,
right.
the character for Chandler. He was terrified of watching himself on screen even years later, and a few others also, they just refuse to watch their own work because it makes them cringe. So I find that incredibly interesting, because here you are creating work that is uniting people all over the globe, and you're questioning it. What more can you have than people like Dalila just sharing how important your work is? So I just find that pretty incredible and interesting.
Yeah. I think it's human nature to kind of question yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And always, you're always trying to improve, and hopefully you are improving. So I don't look at it. I don't criticize myself. I think that was good for that time, right? So it was the best I could do with what I knew. And as the older I get, hopefully I get, my stories get deeper, my hopefully better. I don't know. It's hard for me to judge because I'm always going to be kind of critical of my work, because that's the only way you get better. But I don't look back and say, oh, that's terrible. I don't reread it. I don't reread my old work, but every once in a while, like when I'm looking, like if I'm going to do something and I'm going to speak or I'm going to do a reading, I'll go back and I'll read certain parts and I'll think, oh, that's terrible. But then I'll read some parts and go, hey, wow, did I really write that? So that's not bad. That's not bad. Okay, I'm okay. So yeah.
Yesterday I was reading through my phone the gossip that comes through, right? And Selma Hayek was actually talking about her marriage and talking about her parenting. And one of the things that she said, and it made an impression on me because I wholeheartedly believe in that, she said that you are a good parent when you're constantly questioning yourself, because that helps you grow, right? And I think that makes the point that you're speaking of. We grow from looking back and questioning, did I do that right? Can I do that better? And it is a scary space. It really is a frightening space. And even as a professional, right? With our failures, I've lost jobs because the positions have been dissolved. And I think, okay, did I cause that? Was I inspiring them to the self-episode? It's really easy to put it on me, but then I have to come to a healthier space, right?
Right.
This happened. How do I get a learning lesson out of that and move forward with my integrity intact? So
Right.
there's one thing to criticize your work, and then there's another thing to make it personal on you, right? Growing up with my kids, I would always be very careful, and I would tell them, I am upset with your behavior, not with Cecilia, not with Adriana. It's what you're doing right now that I don't approve.
Right.
But you, I always love, I always approve of. But it's hard to do if you don't
It is.
do it intentionally. You can destroy yourself.
Yeah, you can. And it's funny you mentioned children, because, that's a big part of who I am too, as a mom. And boy, if you want something to kill your ego,
Children.
It's your children. It's because they will point out everything you do wrong. And I remember I created a password that I thought was really cool. My son was like, so cheesy, mom, I'm like, well, I'm going to remember it. Isn't that the whole point? It's like, who would write that? I mean, they will criticize everything and laugh at everything because that's what they're supposed to do. That definitely you're, as a parent, you are always questioned. You always think you do it wrong, and they tell you do it wrong. So I think you just have to kind of take a step back. And I think back to my parents, and I think, I was critical of especially my dad, because my dad had a lot of issues. So it was easy to be critical of him. But, as an adult, I look back and I think, he was just a man, and he did the best he could with what he had. And I forgive him for everything that he didn't do right, because gosh, I'm not going to do everything right myself. So
who's perfect, right?
Right, who's perfect?
Yeah, no, that's it. It's amazing. The parenting, I think it's the biggest lesson that anyone can get in life.
Yes.
And it is so different right now. I know you are an adopting mom, which is, there is another layer to that, because I have a lot of respect for your choices and the beautiful children that you have. And they are beautiful inside out. And if anyone wants to know how beautiful they are, well, I think that all we can do is look at your mom and how much she adores them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's the beauty, I think. Because when grandparents take in their grandchildren, I think that there is, and I can't wait until I become a grandparent, but I think that there is a different level of love and adoration and admiration. So
there is.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing with us. So you talked about you being the author, and comes to mind the next question that we often like to ask, so why do you do the things you do? Why write? You mentioned that you grew into it, but you continue doing it, right?
Right.
It's not like that stopped you.
Yeah, sometimes I ask myself, why am I still doing this? Because the publishing business is a roller coaster. You are on top of the world at some points, and then some points you're all the way at the bottom again. When I first got my first book published, when I first published with that original, it was Kensington Publishing who released the Encanto line of romance books, and they were all Latino. It was a line of Latino romances written by Latina writers. And it was really the first of its kind. It was awesome because it was half in English, half in Spanish. So if you were learning English, right, you could read the romance in Spanish and then go back and read it in English. And I thought it was brilliant. It was, I think Kensington was way ahead of their time. And it only lasted a couple of years. So that's where I sold my first 4 books. And my second book was about to be released when they decided to close the line because it just wasn't working. There weren't enough readers. they weren't really quite sure what to do with it. Even bookstores, they were like, well, where do we shelve these books? Do they go in romances? Did they go in Spanish language? Do they? And it's like, put them in both, you know. But so when I first sold, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to sit in my backyard and just write
Popular,
books.
famous, and
Oh yeah,
everything else.
everything that most, exactly. That's what most authors think, right? Because you don't know. And so, you know, on top of the world. And then when the line closes, you're like, oh my God, now what do I do, right? And the publisher doesn't want you anymore. So there were, I think, 22 of us that were writing for that line. And we were like all thinking, what do we do next? And so I loved writing. I loved writing. So I kind of fell into writing Latino romances. I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't really focus it until I went to a conference and I met this editor that was going to be the editor of this line. And when I met her, and she talked about, I thought, that's exactly what I want to write. I want to write the books that I didn't have when I was young. So when I was a teenager, I didn't have books about my culture, or not even my culture. It didn't even have to be Argentine, right? Just Latino for me, anything that was similar, right? And I grew up in California, so I grew up surrounded by Mexican culture, and that was cool. And I was like, I would have loved to read that. But there wasn't that, unless you read literature, right? High literature, there wasn't. I couldn't just go to the library or go to the bookstore and find a book that reflected my culture or my family. So I thought, that's exactly what I want to write. I want to write that. And so I sent off a book, a manuscript to this editor, and she rejected it immediately. She didn't like it. But she says, well, I like your writing though. Do you have anything else? So I thought, yeah. So I didn't, but I thought, yeah, I do. So I had ideas. And so I wrote another one and I sent it off to her. And that was the one she purchased, right? And so when that line folded, I thought, I want to still continue to write Latino romances. Or books. I don't care if that line folded. I know that there's a market for this. And I know that Latinos want to read about their own culture. So I continued to want to write it for 3 years. So I go from being, you know, a published author to a previously published author, which I think is worse. And at that point, you're starting again. You're starting from scratch, right? And I would send out manuscripts and it would be rejected over and over and over again. So for 3 years, I would get rejections, and the rejections were, yeah, we do want to publish more Latino books, but your books are not Latino enough. And I couldn't figure out what that meant. I was like, what do you mean Latino enough? You do realize that Latinos are varied racially. We're varied in different cultures, where there is no Latino enough. There's just everybody. And then not only that, there's, you know, recent immigrants to this country have a very different perspective than somebody who is third, fourth generation, who has lived here their whole life, who may not even speak Spanish. So how can you pigeonhole us this way? So I became very irritated with that. And so here comes your favorite book, Delila. I was sitting one day just very frustrated after getting another rejection. And I sat here looking out my window at the birds and everything and thinking, what do they want? So are they looking for a bunch of stereotypes? Do they want just stereotypes? And so I started kind of doodling, just writing, okay, what are a bunch of Latino stereotypes? Let's see, all Latinas can dance, all Latinas can cook. And I just got the most ridiculous stereotypes I could think of. And I said, you know, I'm going to write that. I'm going to write this book full of stereotypes. But what grew out of that frustration, was a book about a heroine, right? A young girl, a young woman that works in the movie industry in Los Angeles, who is very Americanized. She's lived here her whole life. She's American, which is another thing that I wanted to say when, you know, who are you? I'm an American. So this character finds out that her mother had an affair with a white guy, right? Years ago. And that her dad might not really be her dad. And so she goes through this identity crisis thinking, oh my God, so maybe that's why I don't feel this connection to my roots. Maybe my dad is really not my dad. Maybe it's this white guy. So she goes on this search to try to find this guy. and to try to find herself, to try to find her identity. And she, and so she thinks that the way to do that is to become more Latina, is to take these stereotypes and become more Latina. It's really was just me saying to the publishers, is this what you want, right? This is what you want us to become, or this is who you think we are. And so it did become a book of my heart, because I was dealing with my own identity issues. I was dealing with, who are we, right? Who am I and who are we as a culture? Do we have to be what other people tell us we are, or are we, or do we get to decide who we are, and so it became, it became the book of my heart. I sent it to my agent at first saying, okay, this is a joke. Okay, don't take it seriously. And she said, oh my God, I love this. And I said, no, you're kidding. She says, you have to finish this book. I can sell it. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And so I kind of put it aside, and she would email me and call me and say, are you working on the book? I was like, well, yeah. She says, no, you can work on the book. I can sell this book. I said, you're really serious? You want me to continue this? And she said, yeah. And so she sold it. She sold it to, it actually went into a bidding war between two major publishers. And eventually it sold. I was contacted by an entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles who wanted to buy the movie rights. And then the author doesn't own the movie rights, the publisher does. So I kept saying, I don't own the movie rights, talk to the publisher. And the publisher didn't pay attention to her. And so years later, once I got my rights back for that book, that lawyer kept calling me, and I'm like, who are you? I'm like, what do you want? And she says, I want to make a movie out of your book. And I thought, well, okay, what do I do? So I had to contact, it was a huge thing. I had to get another lawyer. It was eventually optioned by ABC Family, which is part of Disney. And so here we go, the roller coaster, right? So now I'm way up here again. I've got this book. I'm also working with another publisher at that time, with my Julia Amante name. This lady's trying to make a movie out of the previous book. It was crazy. So it's crazy. It's published. So what ended up happening was that they hired a screenwriter to convert my book into, it was going to be a 10-season. And I say it was going to be because it ended up getting killed on the floor again. But it was going to be a 10-season TV series as she goes through her 10 steps of becoming more Latina. And I think they should have done it. I read the pilot, and it was great. But what happens in Hollywood is they option everything. They have so much money. So they option, about 10 things, and then it goes in front of a bunch of people, and then they decide, yeah, let's do that one, not that one. And so they ended up not doing it, but they still.
I would love to see it on the screen. Whether I've even proposed to Julia, maybe we could get enough comadres to do a play out of it, because I think it would be just so entertaining. At the same, I mean, it has a very serious message in it. Yes, but it is so entertaining. It's hilarious. It has got a hot scenes, because whatever she writes, I mean, she really knows how to write hot scenes. And in every book that she's written, and I've read them all by now, except for those first novels. I'm going to have to go back and pick them up, because I've read everything after the Tennessee Steps. I've read all of your books, and I have been privileged to participate in some of the promoting of your books. It is an exciting life. It really is really cool. I mean, when you had the Say You Be Mine, we went and did the bottles, right? The wine bottles.
The wine bottles.
The winery here in the Inland Empire, and we bottled wine with Julia so that we could do the promotion. I mean, all of that has been exciting and a lot of fun to do. So I can see how the stardom is attractive, but I also have seen you doing the hard work. I've also, heard you.
It is hard work.
Frustrated.
It is. Yeah. And I mean, I think to answer your question of like, why do I keep doing this? I think it is because of the excitement. It's, first of all, I just love to write. Even if I never sold another book, I think I'd continue to write. But it's unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. You could one day be, writing 10 books, and the next be not writing any. So it's exciting. I also love, I love writing for readers. I love meeting people that say, oh, I was really touched by your book. But the stardom thing though, actually, we've talked about this, Dalila. It doesn't attract me. Like, I don't like being on camera. I don't like that kind of stuff. I love the books and I love meeting people. I love going in person to book signings. And I've gotten letters from young writers and non-writers that have thanked me for writing the book. And then that's that being something. It's like, okay, it meant something to somebody, or entertained somebody, or it made somebody think a little bit more. So it's nice, right? And it's the same reason that I love to teach, because with teaching, you're making a difference. And occasionally I'll get, occasionally, not very often with students, but occasionally I'll get an email from a student saying, and I just recently got one from one of my students that I wrote a letter recommendation for, so that he could get a scholarship. And he sent me a really nice email saying he's the first one to go to college in his family, and this is going to allow him to finish, and how, this changes my life, and thank you. And it's like, oh, because it made my day, because it meant something to him, and it helped him. So I think as a writer, I feel the same way. It's like, if it helps somebody, or if it entertains somebody for a little while, it just makes you feel like you're doing something worthwhile. Because most of the time I feel like I'm not. Like, really, I'm just sitting here writing stories. I'm not doing anything, I'm not helping anybody. So
Julia, I love how, using your story and having been feeling like you were boxed as a writer, because that space, the Latino space, was so limited, and they were boxing people within that time.
yeah.
And they're still doing that. They're still doing that. I know the recent movie musical In the Heights was also receiving a lot of backlash, and people also just boxing what the film should be like. It's still something that we're facing, but I love how this book, 10 Easy Steps, you used the feelings that you felt in being boxed, and you transferred that into your work, and it became successful. And you're having a lot of, you had other people wanting to come out to make it a film. And I think there's a lot of power in that, in using your story, transferring that into your work. And that brings me into the next section, the power. How do you feel like you, Julia, best influence others? And I know you touched a bit upon that with your teaching, but how do you feel that you influence others, inspire others? What specifically about Julia does that well?
Influence is an interesting thing, I think, because I don't know that we really do. I think that what maybe we do, hopefully, is spark something within the person. I don't think that you can influence people as much as we think we can influence people. I think that, like, I'm going to go to my children, because those are the people that I want to influence the most, right? And I can maybe tell them the opposite of what I think, because then they'll do it, right? But I think that you can teach, you can model, you can do a lot of things that hopefully inspires them to do what you think is, and then that's another thing is, to a point, I want my children to do what I tell them to do, right? Because every parent wants that. But really, what I want to do is I want to inspire them to think, and to be creative, and to create the life that they want and the dreams that they want. And I would say that, kind of as a writer, it's the same thing. Like, I hope to put ideas out there, and then let those ideas inspire people, however they want to go with it. Like, I don't want to tell them what to believe, or I don't think I have the power to do that, honestly. I think that it's more of just, here are my thoughts, and here are my ideas, and here's a story. and see what they think. When I went back to college to get my master's degree, and so I'd already been a published writer for years, and I decided I wanted to teach. So I had to go and get my master's in my MFA in creative writing. So a lot of my professors are like, "What are you doing here?" And it's like, well, I'm here because I want to teach, right? So I want to. So I didn't feel that I had a lot to learn, because that's my arrogance, right? I don't have a lot to learn because I'm already a writer. But one of the things I did learn was that writers don't own their stories. And the first professor that said that, it's like, oh no, what you think about it, it's not really about. I'm like, what are you talking about? I wrote it. Of course I know what the story is about. But once you write it and you release it and you put a story out there, every reader brings their own background and their own thoughts and their own self to your story, and they're going to interpret it the way that they think. So sometimes, and then I learned that to listen, right? To listen as a writer to what readers say, because it's their story now. It's their story, and whatever they got out of it, whatever they get out of it, that's the value. So I guess my answer is, I don't think that I really have any power to influence anybody. I just have the little power that I have is just to put ideas out there to help people kind of come up with their own ideas, their own inspiration, and their own meaning, I guess, to the book, to life, to everything.
Well, I did read one of your blogs yesterday, sharing about your experience in the difficulties of, or the patience required in being a writer. And I've, in my previous place of employment, I worked with a lot of other comedians, actors, musicians, and the amount of resilience, the amount of persistence that is required in that profession, the profession that requires you to be 100% who you are, authentic, is difficult. And I really appreciated the vulnerability that you shared within your work. And it's so important to share the difficult parts of the journey, to give others that power, and knowing that, just keep going, because, what you're doing is important. And so for me, I mean, I was inspired by your vulnerability, and I think vulnerability is one of those things that is underrated, but incredibly important, because if we have people out there in the world just saying, oh, everything's easy, I am awesome all of the time, and we're going to get nowhere. Everyone's going to be so insecure, and they're not going to make any moves. And so 100%, I think that vulnerability that you have makes you a great person to help future writers in their development and your works. And
I agree with you, Rosa. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And if you don't necessarily see yourself as an influencer or someone of influence, Julia, we need to figure out what term fits you, because we've known each other for a number of years, and you've known my story in pieces, right? And oftentimes I keep pouring my heart onto you, and you say, you need to write a book. You need to write your story. And I keep saying, well, but I don't know how that's going to affect those who were part of that story. Who am I going to hurt? And you always bring me back and say, well, you can think of it that way, but you can also think of how many people you're going to help. Because if they hear your story and see the resilience that Rosa was speaking about, which comes with life, right? We're all the heroes of our own story. We're the villains of our own story. And we're also the pain of our own story, right? But that resilience is there. I mean, we all come through life in one way or another. And so I do think that you have that. And I think that that's why it's genius of you to have this new product that you're working on to help develop the writer in us. From what I have experience with you. I think you see that everyone has a writer within them, and that they have to find the story and then have the courage to put it in paper, right?
Well, everybody has a story, and I mean, we're all kind of this developing story, and yeah, I think that it's kind of a shame not to write it down. It doesn't have to be for publication. Like not everybody wants to be a writer. Not everybody wants to put their stories out there for other people to look at and critique. But I think it's to write it down somewhere. It could be a journal. It could be something. And I've shared with you that I have letters from my grandfather. So when my father first immigrated to this country, my grandfather and my father would write letters to each other, and this was, the ages ago, dinosaur age, right? So there was no.
We're not that old.
You had to write a letter, and so my grandfather would write his letter with a carbon copy underneath, so that the letter that he wrote to my dad he kept. And then when my dad would write him back, he would keep that letter. And so when I was, I think, 17 years old, and I was visiting my grandmother in Argentina, and I was bored one day, and I was just looking through her stuff, and she didn't mind. So I find this, and I'm like, what is this? Oh, that was your grandpa kept that, because my grandpa's been long gone. He kept that, and I started reading it, and it was the history of my dad immigrating to this country. And it was magic to me. It was, I can't even tell you, like now I go back sometimes and read that. And he kept those letters up until, I don't know, I must have been like 5 years old. And so through my birth, through all of these things. And I'm so grateful to my grandfather that he kept that. So I think that everybody should do something. You should write it, because you never know years from now if it's going to be your children or your grandchildren that are going to want to know about you. And you're not going to remember everything. You're not going to remember your life. You're going to remember some little things. But to be able to go and pick that up, that your grandchild pick this up and say, oh my God, wow, look at what grandma did. Grandma was wild. Grandma, did, how cool, seriously, how cool is that? Yeah. So I think that it's if you're not writing it down, you're kind of cheating your family, you're cheating the world. So I think this is what kind of inspired me to start doing this, to say, I sit here 2020 with teaching online to my students, and I thought, why don't I just start doing this? Why don't I see where it goes? And if I get students to that want to write, I think I've got the experience now. I think I can inspire people to write. I think I can teach them the basics. I can get them going, and if they want to publish, awesome. I can walk them through that too. But, I'm going to continue to write, because that's who I am, and that's what I want to do. But I think that, it's another thing is when you get to a certain age, you want to like hold your hand back, right, to the people that are coming up, or the people beside you, and help them do that too. And since I don't have any skills other than writing, that's what I can do. That's my superpower, right? So that's what I'm going to help writers do.
I mean, I think that you have a very important point there. I mean, there was a time when we would sit around grandparents and hear the stories, right?
Yes,
I mean, my husband's dad's still alive, and he has the stories, but he's now close to 90. So his stories are becoming repetitive, and they're edited in a way that, everything is good. Everything is peachy, because I think that what he wants to do is inspire the girls and leave them thinking that life is good. But if we don't talk about the struggle or the pain, getting to the good, it's not as exciting or as flavorful, right? You have to go through this. So I think that writing it gives that opportunity to be able to read, to learn, and to revisit, because every time you read it, you learn something new, right? Because you already captured this essence. So the next time that you come to it, you have a different lens, right? So you find new treasures. And I think that that's important, particularly for families in the way that they're shaped nowadays, whether you're Latino, Asian, I mean, whatever you are, families
Yeah.
are just so spread out. The branches are not touching anymore. They're so
Right.
far apart
And
that the
that's so
way to
sad.
connect perhaps is to leave behind those written stories for them to interpret, to make them theirs, to get to
Yeah.
know who we are. And knowing who you are by understanding where you came from is very important. I mean, in the
Right.
60s, there were plenty of studies that led to the 70s and the Chicano movement, because there was this void, right, of who I am
Right.
and who do I connect with? Am I ni de aquí, ni de allá, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's
What
right.
are my roots? I mean, I get denied in one place and I get ignored in the other. So
Right.
that creates a conflict in you. I have friends who I went to college that one person comes to mind. He was so smart. I mean, he's the most intelligent person I've met in my life. Smartest, not intelligent. Smartest person I've met in my life. He can teach calculus to a 5-year-old and help him understand. I mean, that's how smart he is. But he always
Wow.
lived with this complejo, this put down that his name sounded fully Spanish, but he didn't speak a drop of Spanish other than his name. And he looked Mexican, but he lived the American life. And he served
Right.
in I think he served in the army. So
Wow.
he had a very rich history, but the ghost that hunted him from the void in his identity, I think that that's where the intelligence lacked, because I think that smartness is what you read, the books, what you get at school, right? Intelligence is putting that knowledge together with your experience.
Learning about the past and, kind of their stories and their adventures.
Because it was
Yeah.
so different from, it was a whole new universe.
Yes.
No
Oh, yeah.
electricity, the Pony Express to send mail.
Yeah, and our stories
Really
are going to be
though.
about the dial phone, the record.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 Trying to get used to this technology, it being ever changing.
Yeah, I remember recording songs on a tape recorder and then playing it slow so that I can write down the lyrics. And my kids go, "What? You did what?"
Oh, yeah. Right. Listening to the radio and waiting for that song to come back so you could record it.
Right?
Mhm.
Different times, that's for sure.
Yeah, so spirituality, Julia, that's we believe in health of the mind, body, spirit. And what are tenets of your spirituality or your faith? What is it that you do to stay connected in that way? Whether it's religious, not religious, what are some symbols of your faith?
Well, that's another thing. I'm always on a constant search. I consider myself a Christian Buddhist.
Mm.
And so I grew up Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic. And I moved into, of course, other Christian faiths as I was doing my explorations. And then found Buddhism and found that a lot of my beliefs really matched the Buddhist beliefs. But, Buddhism is a practice, and it's a religion. I said to my sister-in-law not too long ago, Buddhism is not a religion. She says, well, a lot of people would probably argue about that. So it's like, I don't really care what people call it, but it is, Buddha wasn't, he didn't consider himself, right. He didn't consider himself a deity at all. So I love the Buddhist practice. I love nature. I love, and I think that's when I feel most spirit, right? That's when I feel most spiritually connected to whatever is out there. And so I think that's when I get it the most. Like I remember I went to visit a friend in Florida, and we had rented like a timeshare. It was right on the coast, right on the Gulf Coast. And it was after this huge storm. And I was walking along the beach. I got up really early and just walked while my family was asleep and stuff. And there were all these animals that were on the shore because they died, and they had, they'd been pushed out to the shore. And I remember feeling like this sadness, just looking down and going, what a waste, like all these poor fish, all these animals that are out here. And then immediately when I had that feeling of sadness, it was gone. It was like, no, this is life. It's just renewal of life, and there's this energy and there's this power, and it's like, I don't even know where that came from, right? And then probably even more, I don't know, it's kind of creepy sometimes when I think about it. It's like when my dad died, we took my dad to Argentina because he had always wanted to go back, right? He came here, he was going to work, and he was going to spend some years here and live the American dream, and then he was going to go back. Well, he never got to go back because he died. So my brother and I decided that we would take him back home, and to be, buried and all of that. But we had a rough life together. We had, my dad and I, didn't really get along near the end of his life, for a lot of reasons. My parents divorced and all this stuff, and I just didn't like the way it all went down, and I blamed him, right? So I wasn't happy with him. So I was sitting in a little cafe in Argentina, and the little kid had little cards, these like little bookmarks with little sayings. And the kids try to get coins and stuff. They're poor, they're poor kids, and they go into the little cafes and the restaurants, and they try to give you these little things so that you'll give them some money. So he came to my table, and I reached into my purse, and I went to give him some money. And the guy, the person who worked there just said, "Oh, no, we don't do that." And so I just quickly gave him the money, and he gave me the bookmark. And the little kid runs off, right? And right before that happened, I'd been thinking of my dad, obviously, because my dad had just died, and I was just sad. And so I was thinking, did he ever even love me? He did so many things that we would think a father wouldn't do, right? And when I looked at the bookmark, it said, if I had 9 lives, I'd live them all with you. And it was like, it was just, again, it was one of these spiritual moments where I was like, there's my answer, right?
Yeah.
And so there's these things that happen throughout life, right? These little moments, that you think, I don't know that I'm religious. Actually, I could probably say I'm not religious. I don't belong to a church, and I've tried that over times, and it just never worked for me. But I think that, I do have a belief and faith in something, out there somewhere, right? That's deeper than us. And I'm not quite sure what it is that we're all doing here, but I think to me, it would be just to be a good person and love other people and do the best you can while you're here,
I love that. I love that you have this positive way of seeing life, and finding what I call the miracles of life that happen every day, right? I mean,
yeah.
Faith is what we carry inside that keep us connected. Church or religion gives us a structure and how to go about that. And I'm Catholic, and I do in some spaces advocate for Catholicism, and sometimes I question it myself. And right now I'm questioning the church a whole lot. But that's not bad. That's healthy, because that's where we grow. That's when we grow in understanding and in connection of our own spirituality and our own relationship with God or the divinity that is out there. We don't have an explanation for a lot of things. And the more we explain it, or the more we learn, the more questions we have, right? And then those questions that arise, that's where God is for me. So that's how I see it. That's how I find it. So I really appreciate you making that connection, that there are things that happen that have no explanation, yet there they are. And you can take them, you can embrace them, and they help you move on, or you can fight them and try to explain it in a million ways. And I think that most people, when they spend a lot of time trying to explain it in a different way, they get angrier, not because God is not with them, but because they have to keep fighting this. This is space that we're all part of. We won't know the truth, and we won't discover the mystery until when we die, right? And even then,
Right,
some of us believe we'll discover it, and others are like, okay, that's the end, and that's it. So thank you for your generosity and for your honesty. I think that's what enriches the stories that we want to bring to these conversations, to these spaces, because just like Latinas are not fitting in one mold, women in general do not fit in one mold. And one of the concepts that Rosa and I have been developing is this idea that in the general culture and in the US, we talk about wearing hats, that's the different we play our hats. We like to think of wearing different shoes because hats kind of like constrain you. They put a cap on your thinking. And I love hats, don't get me wrong, but I love shoes a lot more. So, wearing different shoes and then stepping into different spaces so that we can explore them, we can discover them, and we can own them. We don't have to stop being mom and reject being a mom to be a professional, right? When I'm a mom, I put on my comfortable chanclas and I want to have them handy because if I need to throw it. But when I'm at work, I want to have a different kind of a shoe. I'm stepping in a different environment. I have to have a different look and a different pair of shoes. So we do have many shoes that we wear because there are many spaces that we step into. And the spiritual spaces is one of them. We can't neglect it.
Right.
And our kids fight us with that because they think that they have discovered something else. But we did the same thing with our parents. So
yeah. Well, they have to have their own journey too. And I know, like one of my kids thinks, "Oh no, there's nothing out there. I don't believe in anything." And it's like, well, then you believe in something because you can't. There's no believing in it, nothing. So it's a journey, and I don't really push my beliefs on them because I think if I'm still figuring it out at my age, then they have time.
Well, Julia, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we're coming out to just about the end of our show today. How can our guests follow you? What can we do to keep up with Julia Amante?
Well, you can go to, gosh, I'm all over now. My Facebook is, juliaamante.com. Oh, actually, Julia, what is it? I think it's just Julia Amante, Facebook / Julia Amante. Yeah. Also, I try to blog daily. I'm going to probably, I'm working my way to not blogging on Sundays. I'm trying to not work on Sundays and try to do, it probably won't work, but but for right now, I'm blogging every single day. So I'm on Medium, so you can find me there, or you can just go to my website, which I'm going to be updating here pretty soon, which is just juliaamante.com.
Thank you. Any last words, Dalila, before I close it off?
I highly recommend that if you want to explore Julia's writing site, to do it, because I know it's helping me. I'm putting my story in order, and I think I have more time to write. We'll see. But I'm trying to do a little bit of that every day. So do hear and listen and take it to heart what Julia has shared with us about leaving the stories behind for the generations to come, and maybe even to the generations that we're in touch with, because maybe we will build some understanding by them reading what we've gone through and what we've accomplished. So Thanks a million for being here. You know I'm your number one fan. I do highly recommend that women pick up Becoming Latina in 10 Easy Steps. It's a fun read. It's a fast read. It has a lot of content, and it has a lot of inspiration within all that light reading that you do.
I just want to thank you both for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. All right, so I'll start closing us off. I just want to thank all of our guests as well this morning for joining our bi-weekly clubhouse chat, Cafecito con Chisme. We hope that we have left you inspired and enlightened for the day, and we're excited for you to join us again in 2 weeks. And then as we do like to end our show, I would like to leave you all with some food for thought. Today's quote is, "There are no perfect structures or perfect people. There is only the struggle to get there." Thank you, and have a wonderful day, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us.